Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday, March 10th, 2020 meeting of the Yellow Springs Planning Commission. I'm Frank, calling the meeting to order. And would you call the roll, please?
I would. Doden?
Here.
Stiles?
Here.
Curlis?
Here.
Collada?
Here.
Also present is Zoning Administrator Denise Swinger, Public Works Director Johnny Burns.
Yeah, just a quick review of the agenda, and it is a pretty light agenda tonight. We'll have a review of the minutes, review of any communications, which don't have any listed on here. Is that still the case?
Yes.
Council report?
I don't think I have anything relevant to,
I'll give you a shot if you.
yeah, thank you. I think relevant to planning commission.
I want to give a little update, but I could do that later under old business,
Okay.
or I don't know, how would I do that? Just
You know,
a quick
upfront
update?
is a little, it's.
Better?
Yeah.
Okay, at the last planning commission meeting,
Just let me finish reviewing I was just reviewing the agenda.
oh, he's reviewing the
Right,
agenda,
yeah.
oh, okay, I'm so
Yep,
sorry.
yeah, and then
I'm
we'll-
so sorry.
Yeah, so council report, then we'll have a time for citizens' comments for anything that's not on the agenda. Public hearings, and we don't have any public hearings scheduled for tonight. Then we'll go on to the old business of the subdivision regulation discussion with a couple members of the Environmental Commission will be joining us. New business and some agenda planning, and then that will be it. So, let's review the minutes of the Tuesday, February 11th meeting. Does anybody have any additions or changes to page 1? Page 2? Page 3? Page 4?
I have one for 4, and this
Okay.
is something Denise said. So it's the third sentence down, Swinger stated. And I think it should say she would ask that the solar maybe panel business
Oh, up here.
be moved off-site, because I don't think you were saying just the solar business needed to be moved off-site. Or is that what you were saying, the entire business?
Yeah, that the business had expanded to the point where it was really no
Oh,
longer
so you
a
were
home.
saying that.
Didn't really fall under that category, yes.
Okay, okay, thank you for that.
Okay, anything else on page 4? Page 5? Page 6? Page 7?
I'm trying to see where in here one of the things that we added, we had specific conditions, because I went back through later and looked at my notes and what we were saying. But we also had added that they were to get an agreement with the neighbors, something that was a satisfactory agreement with the neighbors regarding this parking issue.
That is.
I didn't remember us saying an agreement. What I remember us saying is that they were going to identify certain parking spaces that were for visitors and that the neighbors
Well-
could use them.
Well, but they would
But-
also work with the neighbors.
That
to-
work with the neighbors to get some, to have
That's
some
in
sort.
Doden's motion.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, is it in the
Yeah, on
motion?
page 8.
Oh, okay, sorry. All right, as long as it's in there somewhere, so,
Yeah, continue to work with the neighbors on Woodrow Street
Yes.
to
Okay.
mitigate the parking
yeah,
issues.
okay, good.
Okay, anything else on page 8? Pages, I guess, 9 and 10. Nothing, okay, with that done, I move that we approve the minutes.
I seconded.
I just have, okay. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Okay, the minutes have been approved. Now we can go on to communications, and there were no communications, right? No letters or anything? No, okay. Okay, now we'll do the council report, and then Denise, did you have something that you wanted to say as well?
Yeah, about the last planning commission meeting.
Okay.
So at the last planning commission, commission meeting, we had passed with conditions, a long list of conditions for the approval of the pocket neighborhood development. So it was left to staff to work with Home Inc. to determine what we could do as far as parking on street. whether we do angle parking, look at the width. Also being able to have some sort of an agreement that met with the neighbors. All in all, there was, I kind of felt a little unsettled because, I was kind of communicating via text with Johnny during the meeting to try to figure out, could we do angle parking if we have this much right away? And, there was this discussion around the idea of giving 5 parking spaces on Homing's property. But by doing so, if we're giving 5 spaces to the neighbors, then that's 13 spaces left for the people that were on the property. So that kind of bothered me. Yeah, so I held a meeting with Johnny Burns, Josue, our solicitor, Home Inc., Colin Altman, and the civil engineer for Home Inc. And we all got together in a room and tried to hammer this out. And we actually did come up with a solution to the problem that is going to be a win-win actually for everyone. So they basically, the Home Inc. has to go before the BZA to get an 8-foot variance. And what they're going to do is they're going to push the homes over, so they won't have a 20-foot setback on Woodrow Street. They'd have a 12-foot setback, but that would allow them to have a 20-foot wide driveway off of Xenia Avenue on the north side of the property. And that would eliminate the need for a fire lane at all on Woodrow Street.
Wonderful.
So that way, if something happens, they can pull in either on the driveway at the north to fight a fire there, or they can pull in from Woodrow Street or at Xenia Avenue. And Colin agreed to that. And that we didn't have to expand the parking area, which would have eliminated a building, because he felt as long as he can get into a certain point, he can always back his truck back out. So hopefully, this will go to BZA and they'll approve that.
So does that mean that on-street parking that they had initially marked, which then became the fire lane, that the parking is back?
Yeah,
Great.
yes.
And how many spaces was that? Was that like 4? 4 or 5?
And, depending on who you talk to, it could be anywhere from 4 to 7. So, yeah.
Oh, good.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you for all that
Yes.
work. I was hoping stuff would be able to be worked out, so.
Yes.
Laura, did you have
Yeah,
council
I
report?
think the thing to note about the last council meeting is that Josue, the village manager, presented a status report about stormwater management, which is our topic of the evening, and that the village may be moving towards a stormwater utility improvement or some additional infrastructure. It's certainly needed. One of the issues of concern in the village right now is just over the years of decades and decades, people have tied sump pumps and downspouts into the sanitary. So that means a lot of clean water's hitting the wastewater treatment plant. And we're using money, chemicals, and, unnecessary expenditures to clean water. So anyway, this is a bigger discussion we're having tonight as to how to, control on-site stormwater and keep it from going we basically shuttle all our stormwater into the Glen as quickly as possible and try to do more on-site detention. And Josue's joining us tonight, so he may have some other comments.
Okay, thank you very much.
You have a few more comments on that, just to catch them up, or did I summarize it pretty well?
You did. I think the only thing I would add is that we want to encourage residents to build in these features to do water retention. I think that's part of the conversation tonight on the subdivision regulations, as we're considering those changes on the zoning. And I would like us to consider steps beyond that. How do we keep clean water clean? We shouldn't be treating it and just putting it right back into the stream. But we also want to be innovative about what the next approaches are. We currently have, the current revenue streams are limited to those that are paying property taxes, and those that have utility accounts. and those resources, financial resources, are not enough for us to do all the things that we need to do and we want to do. And there are also property owners that may not be contributing their fair share because they have larger properties, larger water displacement, and so exploring a stormwater utility would help us shift some of that burden on those individuals that are responsible for more of the stormwater displacement, and they should be contributing to the system.
Can I ask something? I guess I wasn't clear on stormwater utility. Does that mean a charge for people who?
Potentially a charge,
Okay.
and they're also complementary with a credit system that, you know, they would get credit if they build in some of those features on their property.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it? for-
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll have time for citizen comments, if anybody wants to speak about anything that we don't have on the agenda for tonight. Okay. That, no public hearings, right?
Nope.
Okay. So we will go on to our old business of the subdivision regulations, and we do not have our environmental commission members yet.
Yes.
We have one environmental
Oh.
commission member.
Okay.
We
Oh.
could,
I think we
Yeah,
had
it was, it
said
was,
7:30,
it was
didn't you?
two other people on the environmental commission that were supposed to be here. And Nadia. Okay, so, well, when they get here,
You can go ahead and
go
start.
ahead
Yeah,
and start.
go
You
ahead
wanna
and
have
start.
Johnny sit up here?
Yeah.
Okay, all
I
right.
mean, I don't know if they're gonna show up, so if Johnny wants to sit next to
Okay,
Frank.
that
then
sounds good.
If they don't, I'll just stay up here and keep typing.
So, I don't know how you want to tackle this. I mean, I suggested maybe we just go through it line item by line item, maybe. It's up to you. I mean, there's some definite pieces to it that I think should be taken out of it, which I have marked as such. But I feel like there's, I've added some other sections that are not just the design standards, because they do have an effect. Also within the zoning code, some other sections. So however you want to handle it. Frank, you want to just go line item by line
I
item?
think so.
Okay, well, maybe just starting with Exhibit A, which is the subdivision regulations themselves. Okay. Okay, so I didn't have any suggestions for page 1, page 2, or page 3 of the subdivision regulations, nor did I have any for page 4. On page 5, which is 122604, submission of an action on final plats, it mentions that to the village manager, but these are pretty old, and now that we have somebody who does the planning, it could be or his or her designee, is what I was suggesting. And then we have final plats submitted 14 days before, but we do have to post that and notification in the paper. So I'm thinking 20 days. And that is consistent, 20 days is consistent with everything else pretty much in the code that we have. 20 days for conditional use hearings and other things. I highlighted under design standards, and Johnny, this might be something you want to look at.
Page
12
6.
On page 6, 122606, on streets. My understanding is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Johnny, pavement of streets, the water, the sanitary sewer systems would still follow Greene County's specifications, and which they had in here as Article 8 of Greene County subdivision division regulations as amended. But that construction of curbs and gutters, any associated storm sewers and driveway aprons shall be according to our stormwater management design standards. Which, okay, all right. And we have those design standards which have been written by Choice One, and you've reviewed, and then the driveway standards that are in the zoning code, which you've also reviewed.
Correct.
Can you summarize how the design standards are different between those two?
Between Article 8, I didn't get a chance to review that.
Okay.
I mean, I think a lot of them are a lot of it's very similar. Are you talking about like with driveways or?
Yeah, like why not, I'm just saying, why are we going
Oh,
away
as
from
far
the
as
Greene
storm-
County standard for curb
For-
driveway apron and all that stuff to ones we've contracted to have written with Choice One?
Partly for the driveways is what we found is that people don't even, they just bypass Greene County altogether. So this kind of gives us a little bit of local control with working in the right-of-way permits. And then we end up having our, Johnny, you can speak to that, our people that go and check them anyway.
Right, we inspect the driveway aprons. The other thing is the driveway aprons on Greene County has to be so many feet away from a side lot line and stuff to where we can let them squeeze it in where they can versus at Greene County standards, they could make them cut down a tree to be able to put in a driveway where we can adjust where needed. And then the sewers and storm sewers, Greene County does not really offer anything alternative, where we're offering maybe making swells and stuff like that.
Thank you.
And one of the reasons we're updating this is the calculations that they used were from like the 1980s, and climate change, has changed. And they are, I've talked with the new executive director, relatively new, he's been there over a year now, with regional planning, and they're aware that it's something that they needed to update, and I think they're in the process of updating their own as well. So I'm just suggesting that we just change the page 7, just to say that striking out the runoff control sediment abatement resolution from Greene County and inserting our own new section on stormwater management systems. Now, estate streets is a little bit different. Estate streets, there is a diagram of an estate street, which is Appendix A. Let me see, where did I put that?
Up in front.
Is it right in front?
It's a
Did I- oh, I-
exhibit.
I-
Appendix, it's page 2.
Oh, I incorporated it into my report, sorry. Yeah, on page 2 of my report. This was originally, and again, this is from a long time ago, and this was a design that would allow properties, rather than having storm piping, to have these types of swales. And Johnny, they're primarily in places like Allen Street.
Correct.
Gordon. So one of the things we've discussed is maybe allowing that type of design on more, a little bit denser properties with an idea of channeling then whatever water isn't absorbed to an eventual catch basin. And Johnny, you can probably provide a little bit more information on
Well,
that.
we're just trying to eliminate a lot of the piping. This is more maintenance friendly. We can keep it clear, and less clogs into the storm sewers and stuff like that. Some people can't get down there with the storm, but we can make a swell and make it run down the roadway. Herman Street's another prime example.
So would we need to add any other language? Because I know people over time will put things in shrubbery and things like that. Is there anything that you would like to see?
That's in the road right away, so they
Yeah.
should be contacting us anyway.
Okay.
And then we can tell them what they can and cannot plant.
I had a question about the estate streets, and this may not be the time.
No,
But those
it
are
is.
the more narrow streets, right? Is that correct?
Well, actually, your right-of-way is 50 feet wide, and the street itself is 22 on average.
Okay, so is that the same as other streets? Do we have estate streets right now
Yes.
in the village? Where?
Oh, Orton Road is an example.
Okay, Orton Road. Okay.
President. Yeah.
I had a concern in some of the, what we were thinking may be newer developments, where you have a higher concentration of houses, having estate streets. Because parking, as we've heard at our meetings, is such an issue. And it seems as though the estate streets don't really allow that on-street parking both sides and cars being able to go down.
Right, and there were some design, which we don't have it in here, but if we update our appendix, there are designs that you can make where what would typically be a tree lawn would be the parking area. I've seen that like in Florida and places where they've done that. And maybe I can just bring back for
Yeah.
that next meeting, some designs that show where you can do that on-street parking.
Because that's a concern. In Columbus, where my grandkids live, streets are narrow. They have parking on both sides, and you can only get one car down. And I know in Yellow Springs, when you drive around now, the properties that are big, like on Orton Road, they have plenty of parking. But in other neighborhoods where you have a lot of cars, a lot of houses are
kind
closer,
of a problem
you
on
have a lot of
the land.
cars.
Where the houses are closer to the street and the driveways aren't as long. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard other arguments for that, is that it does slow down traffic in neighborhoods. I mean, yeah, I'm just saying. So,
Yeah.
but I could come back then when we do our, if we get through this and we do our public hearing, I could come back with a couple other examples of how we could have this estate
Yeah,
street.
parking.
But I think the one thing that we don't want to have in here, if we're gonna allow it, is to require that it has to have such wide frontage. I think the frontage should still follow what the zoning code
Sure.
does now, which is 40, 50, and 60 feet, depending on whether you're in RC, RB, or RA.
Say that again.
So right now,
All lots fronting have to have an average 100-foot.
yeah, which is this big properties.
Yep.
And what we're talking about here is if we're gonna allow this type of estate street design, maybe we don't wanna call it an estate street, I don't know. But it's that type of design with the, without the piping, that allows for the swales, that we at least, just instead of collectively average 100 feet of frontage, that the lots fronting must follow the frontage for that zoning district, or,
Why do you think such large lot fronts were required in the first place? Because there kind of probably was a reason.
probably,
Probably connected with the term estate street.
Oh,
or what, Johnny, do you think it had to do more with the water,
I wouldn't have a clue.
flow?
Amount of
or
They are
water.
very large
amount of
lots.
water and flow? I don't know.
It'd be good to find out. I mean, so the estate street design looks to me like you've got swales that are it's ground, so it's permeable, some gets absorbed, so that's a good thing, right? So this is one problem, if you gravel it over with packed limestone with absorption for parking, you'd lose that. I mean, that's the idea, is the swales are helping with that absorption. And then move, slowing it down and moving it, not so much.
Gravel, though, wouldn't allow water to go through it.
I'm not sure packed limestone would,
It will, but not very
not as
fast.
much. I mean, so the advantage of the swales on both sides, that design, I mean, it's cheaper for the village, is that correct? I mean, we're not
Correct.
putting in piping, it's
No,
easier
correct.
to keep clean. It doesn't get clogged up, or if it does, you can clear it out. Okay.
Is it cheaper for the village, or is it really just cheaper for the developer too? I mean,
No, I
kinda-
think it's cheaper for both of them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's for everybody. Because you don't have the maintenance of the drainage, you don't have to worry about going back there and unclogging it.
What, do you see any real disadvantages to this, to moving to this direction?
No, I don't see a disadvantage.
A question I have you had an experience of any of them getting overgrown? where you've needed to go in and clear them out?
I have not as to date.
Okay. When I was in Florida this winter, they have those, and it was a massive undertaking by the county because they were overgrown, and they were having the problem with water on the roads, so they were going through and clearing out all the vegetation. Now, that's a different climate, so maybe that was part of it, but it was amazing, because I thought we've had some in town that have been overgrown, but,
Well, if anything, he's had situations where they've actually entered the storm pipes, where the roots of trees have gone into the storm
Yeah.
pipes and caused.
That's been our biggest issue.
yeah.
I know Wright Street, if Wright Street's considered an estate, there is some overgrown there, but it's a matter of going and cleaning the ditch line out versus digging up the whole road.
Yes, yes, yeah.
So, I'll come back with, okay, for that. Okay, on B, on page 7, I just added in there, following the design standards for stormwater management systems in accordance with 122606A6. That's pretty standard language. So the number C, driveway connections crossing drainage swales must conform to. We do have in the stormwater section, choice one did have a language in there about the driveway connections crossing the drainage swales. So it's under the village now. Please join us,
That
Tom.
would, and that would require like a culvert of some kind?
Correct.
And Johnny, you're comfortable with all these things coming to you?
Yep,
Okay.
because I think the village should have some say in the size. 'Cause some
Yeah,
people
yeah.
like to go small.
Oh, well,
and we
yeah,
like
for
to-
sure. That could be a big problem if it wasn't sized right,
Correct.
yeah.
Hi, Tom Dietrich from the Environmental Commission is joining us. Now, Tom, we're just starting on these subdivision regulations. We haven't gotten very far yet.
Yeah, I was told 7:30, so.
Do you have them?
We're in,
Oh.
we're in Exhibit A,
Okay.
page 7 is what we're up to.
So, yes, page 7. And Tom, I didn't know if you had any concerns prior to page 7 that you wanted to share. Otherwise, we'll just keep moving on. And this is the Exhibit A that we're working on. All right, that's okay. I just said we haven't gotten very far, so. Do you
We
have
got
your,
through the first stuff.
do you have your copy of your?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, perfect.
Okay, I am up to speed then.
Okay. Yeah, she has her copy.
Okay, sorry.
So, do you want me to just keep continuing on page 7 then? Okay.
You may want to let them know who just joined.
Can you let me
So-
know your process?
We're just starting with appendix, or Exhibit A. Yes, and we're on page 7.
Okay.
Okay, and joining us is Nadia Malarkey and Tom Dietrich of the Environmental Commission. So also on page 7, the ADA compliant sidewalks shall be required along all public streets unless the estate street design is being utilized, which typically the estate street design does not require sidewalks, but I believe Johnny or even Josue could answer this one, put Josue on the spot too. that we're kind of moving towards a more walkable community, I'm thinking that we're gonna want to have sidewalks in any new developments,
Correct.
so.
Can we
um,
strike the language in yellow?
Yes.
And my hope is we can have the Estate Street design, if, hopefully the right-of-ways are wide enough to also do an ADA compliant sidewalk with that.
Yeah,
Am I dreaming?
well, we can
Anyway,
try.
that would be a hope,
Well, we're certainly working towards that goal wherever we can.
yeah. So we're gonna, then it'll say ADA compliant sidewalks shall be required along all public streets.
Okay, and we will strike that.
Where's that?
On page 7. And it's
C3.
C3.
Okay.
And,
Can I make a comment about something before that?
sure, go ahead.
On alleys, you state that they should be 25 feet in width and alleys shall be paved. Are you talking about further adding hardscaping material that could create more runoff? Is there a provision for it to be porous?
We there
It's
yet?
under number C2 on the same page.
Oh, okay.
It was just an observation.
No, that's interesting, because it also it does cover Greene County specifications, which we don't tend to follow if they are required to be paved. I
I
don't
can
think any
only
of ours are
require,
paved.
there's 2 of them in the village that's paid. One behind Dollar General. And one between Davis and Whiteman.
Because that's a lot of hard surface that would be added if they decided to
Correct.
pave all the alleys in Yellow Springs.
So what are
We
they,
don't plan on doing that.
are they packed limestone with gravel? Is
Back
that what-
limestone with gravel.
So just to clarify for Brian,
Yes,
so these are
New?
subdivision regulations, so only
They're new.
moving forward, only if a subdivision is being considered would these be implemented. They're
Correct.
Not retroactive.
no.
Why don't we just strike that second sentence? Is there a we have a design standard?
Well,
for it?
I think the reason why it's there is if somebody wanted to have an alley behind the residentials or whatever.
Birch
and
3
their-
has an
and their
alley design.
Trash is back there and all that.
Right,
They gotta have a hard
Access.
surface for the trash trucks and,
So
I think we
according
gotta
to
leave-
Greene County specifications, it does have to
Correct.
be paved?
yes.
Okay.
So it can't be like gravel like they have in the country roads
It's more maintenance headache because of the
for
heavy
snow
equipment.
and
Snow
snow
and-
plowing?
Trash trucks and,
would we want to restate it to say that the alley designs, or design has to be approved by the Village of Yellow Springs?
I think it'd be the Village of Yellow Springs. Because we've had this come up already, and they tried to put gravel, and it didn't go through, nothing went through, but that was one of the big kickers, that they was wanting to use gravel and still have their trash trucks run up and down it. And after the subdivision's built, then it's up to the village to maintain it. And that would just be us constantly going out there to repair the gravel.
So we just strike out paved and just put alleys shall be constructed according to Village of Yellow Springs specifications.
I think so.
And number 5, lots shall be in conformity with the Village of Yellow Springs zoning code and applicable provisions of Article 5 of the subdivision regulations of Greene County as amended, which I really don't know if we should just go ahead and keep that in there. Here's the thing, I've not had the pleasure of going through a plat review like this we don't have land that usually, undeveloped land that gets developed very often. And I'm sure there's certain things with ODOT, and Tom, you're an engineer, you would probably be able to answer this, that there are some things, and especially when we get into sanitary or water sanitary engineering that Greene County needs to be involved in, or at least sign off on. Tom, do you have any thoughts on that?
Regarding,
Regarding lots, the fact that we have a requirement in there about applicable provisions of Article 5 of the subdivision regulations of Greene County as amended, excluding Section 518G.
yes.
So, I mean, I don't want us to strike something that's necessary because of other things that were, I mean, they have their own subdivision regulations.
And we don't have a copy of those
You
right
should
now.
have,
we do.
everybody,
So-
everybody,
Yeah, it's on the back.
That's what this is?
Yeah, in the back.
This thing?
yeah,
Right there.
everybody has a copy of it.
Article 5.
Okay.
518G excluded.
Cross reference.
Yeah, it's all 518.
Excluding 518.
Which section is it, 5-1?
518G.
Okay.
518G is, and this is excluding 518G, the maximum depth of a lot shall not be greater than 3 times the width of the lot. Lots which contain an acre of 5 acres or more shall not be greater than 4 times the width of the lot. I mean, I understand the part where, double frontage lots shall be avoided as much as possible, which I think we do try to do that, or have. We don't have a lot of those. If we want to keep that in there because of some other design standards that are in Article 5, we can. I mean, Article 5 talks about easements and floodplains and dedication of parks and public ownership of storm drains.
I think we keep it in there.
Okay. Does everybody agree? Just leave it, 'cause it's worked for us all these years, so. Okay, so that takes us to page 8. Uncommon lot configurations. I was suggesting we strike out our permitted access on local streets only. 2 must be approved by the planning commission, and that was something that we changed a year or 2 ago, where any lots that are developed with an uncommon lot configuration has to come to planning commission. It can't just be approved by zoning. And then that brings us to 6, stormwater management systems. This is what Choice 1 has added. This is, what they're suggesting is, just to, in a nutshell, if you are building on a lot, a new lot, if you are developing a new subdivision, then you will need to have a stormwater management plan in place that is done by a licensed Ohio engineer, and that will have to accompany the plat design that comes before planning commission. What it also is saying in here is that if you are building on an existing lot that is basically has happened as a result of our lot splits and our infill development, then we're still gonna require that again. When people come to do a lot split in an existing subdivision, they have to go and get a survey done. That would be the time possibly that they should also go ahead and plan for that stormwater management plan. Or it could be left up to the person who is building the house, the developer or the contractor that comes. But we definitely want to require that there's some sort of plan in place and that they have mitigated the water or intend to. Or we also have a lot of accessory structures, that's 800 square feet or less, that are being built that were above and beyond what had originally, from the original subdivisions, because we changed our requirements for lot size. And we're able to add more in here, so that changes the, we've changed the setbacks and what had originally been. Lot coverage has stayed the same pretty much. There's still, the lot coverage from many, many years ago is still the same today in the new code, but we have changed the setbacks, so that allows people more room to build on. And I'm gonna leave it up to people here who are more expert at this than me, as to what do you think about this language and how we should go about requiring it.
So what are the stormwater guidelines for low-impact development? So what would happen if it's an 800 square foot or less impact? What would happen?
It's in,
That's
there's a
Exhibit
attachment.
B.
Exhibit P.
Choice one recommendations.
Can I jump
Yeah,
in
sure,
and give
sure.
a
Go ahead.
quick analysis of this? So
Yes.
stormwater, just as a background, I do stormwater engineering. So I was excited to see these. I think there's some really good content here and improving the way that we would manage stormwater. The stormwater guidelines for low-impact development, I submitted my comments on that. I think they are probably good for our village, for a small village, and they have a lot of good practices to be employed. The trigger of 800 square feet, I think, is something that we should discuss and visit about, because, like you said, maybe some accessory structures are going to be 800 square feet, maybe some, micro houses or what do they call them? Little tiny houses
Tiny houses.
might fit that, but pretty much every other home development is going to be more than 800 square feet. So we're not going to be able to apply these on a lot of infill. And I think this would be really, it's say right now, if we apply the rest of the stormwater regulations, if low-impact development is not available for an infill, then you're going to have to build a detention pond. According to the way these are written, you're going to trigger requiring a detention pond on an infill. And that's not really where we want to go with this, right?
So, okay, let me make sure I'm understanding. If someone does a lot split and we do an infill, what we're saying is that with that single-family development, you have to have a stormwater management plan. We're not following the low-impact design guidelines. We're following the more stricter requirements.
Which, as I'm reading it, have
Yeah.
basically two options, one a retention pond or one a detention pond. So those require a lot of land, and if I'm thinking of this right, if we're just talking about a lot split where, it's a
Yes.
double lot, and now it's just a regular, 15,000 square foot lot or 11,000, I don't know what they are.
Yeah.
There's not room for a detention pond, and you really we don't need to trigger that, or we don't. I personally, my opinion is that we don't need those, and these low-impact development type of practices are applicable for small lots. I agree that there needs to be a trigger, we need a threshold.
Right.
So that this is not applied to a large development. So a new planned development should not follow, should not just be able to plant a few trees and call it good.
So what you're saying is for the whole subdivision, with these smaller lots, when they come before us for the plat, then that would definitely kick in the stricter standards, because that developer is gonna have to show where his detention area is on that larger piece of property.
Right.
But we should, for these smaller infill, just stick with the low impact.
I think that's applicable. That's
Okay.
appropriate for infill development.
And I wasn't certain if the low impact was more of a suggestion. I mean, I think it should be a requirement too. I know you had mentioned that.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. One of the things I put in my letter was that, and I think you have it, I later read there was the homeowner has to sign some, it's like becomes part of the deed, or I forget how it was written. But there's some,
Yeah,
I don't remember where it is, but that, I think that was covered, that basically the homeowner is now committing to implementing and maintaining in perpetuity these practices. Because that's a real concern. I've seen a lot of stormwater ponds or any kinds of practices put in and constructed and then walked away from, and then they do not perform the function that they're designed for.
Didn't we do that on Winter Street with a conditional use, when they were putting auxiliary unit in the back? We definitely put conditional uses on it, just for that reason. Because we knew it was a big auxiliary unit development that was gonna be there, a big house, whatever they were putting back there. And we were, I think even Mary Ann was in that, we were talking about the surface area of that unit was gonna push off so much water. And I think we put exactly that kind of, that term is into it, that we would come back and address it to see how it was gonna work, if it was gonna work properly, if it was gonna fit the need of pushing the water properly.
but do you think that we should typically, in this case, do we do that during the lot split, like you're saying with at the planning commission level for the lot split? Do they need to come with that plan, with that low impact plan? Or do they come with that plan when they're ready to build on it?
I feel that with any kind of, I tend to look at rainwater as a resource. And this is a bigger philosophical issue, but it has to do with green infrastructure, which has to do with harvesting, saving, infiltration of rainwater as opposed to rushing it off and putting it somewhere else. So that's a philosophical issue that might have to do with education long-term about how we manage our rainwater, which really should be seen as an incredible resource. So my feeling is if anyone's going to be doing any kind of design, the whole issue of rain and water and storage needs to be front-ended as the designers, the architect, landscape, whatever is going on from the get-go. So that is forefronting. So it's not like, I've got this plan, and now let's see how we're going to deal with water. No, that goes part and parcel with every development that's going to be put forward. And has to be seen in a bigger content, because retention basins are really not cutting it. And what they talk about is the amount of water that used to flow in this place and keeping it all at a certain level. But what happens when those basins, retention basins, all overflow at the same time? And you've got an exponential amount of water. It's not just what was on this lot, but everyone's property. So, I mean, you probably have seen that, Johnny. So anyway, I'm just putting that out there. I'll talk about, suggestions of where to get some of this information. But my point is, to cut it short, it should be front-ended as part and parcel of a design process.
Okay, so I'm hearing you say through the design of the house itself?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So,
All at once. If we're going to do a lot, I'm getting what you're saying too. If we're splitting a lot and they're coming with a plan, I mean, we're not just splitting the lot. You're coming with the full plan. We want to split the lot, and here's the house we want to put on, and I want to see the whole design.
that's not what's happened though.
And that's maybe what should.
No, we've had people that have split their lot with the hopes of then selling it.
Yeah.
Right.
And so they haven't come with a design.
I favor having the stormwater design as a condition of the split.
Okay, so, and honestly, if you're following the requirements for that they'll know what their total lot coverage is. So it doesn't matter if the house is small or big, you're gonna go with the more stricter standard. So you would probably design it with the fact that if you're an RC, they could have 50% of that lot covered by a house and a structure as, within that setback. So they're gonna have that area that's outside of the setbacks that they can actually build their house on, and that is where they would design, the stormwater plan based on on that. Is that how
Yeah,
I'm
but
understanding it?
I would say it's very typical to require the design of the stormwater controls along with the construction. I mean, you don't, a split lot is still pervious.
Yeah.
It's still infiltrating water, you don't need controls for that. So if you have a regulation, if we implement a regulation that says, if you build on this lot now, you have to do these stormwater controls, then I don't think you have to attach it to the deed, or make it contingent on the split. You're saying, to be developed, when you're buying this lot and you want to develop it, you will then have to implement controls. I think that's the way the regulation.
That would make sense,
ordinance is
because,
written.
yeah, if you're splitting it, fine, and then then they sell that, then they finally sell that lot, and then the next person comes in and is going to build, then they gotta come with the full plan and address it at that
And
point
it
in time.
puts the onus on the builder, the new owner.
Right, on the new one.
Who is the person who's gonna own and maintain. They should have input on the design of the stormwater controls that they're gonna own.
And it might end up being that people choose the smaller footprint so that they can have more space for
Right.
porous surfaces, more green space in
Right,
their
they
yard.
could- right, they could
Rather than
reduce-
just filling up to the max. And so it's a holistic view of the village, is how are we gonna deal with these little pocket neighborhoods, and really thinking proactively and creative ways outside the box of what a house should or shouldn't look like, so.
Right, I think you're gonna absolutely control the size of the house, which I think is what we wanna go for, is they already know that house is gonna be X, this is as big as it can be, and, buyer's gonna go in there knowing that they're coming into, this is what the lot is, and this is what the size of the house is, and it's gonna be clear to them that this is what they have to do, I think.
So, I mean, in the case of pocket neighborhood developments, we definitely can have it at the very forefront, because we know that they're coming with the whole design for the pocket neighborhood development.
Right.
But, okay, help me again, if someone decides to split their lot and they don't do anything with it for a number of years, where is the trigger?
When somebody decides
When they
to
sell,
build.
when
Right,
they sell
yeah,
the lot.
apply for
Right,
a
I mean, it's
permit
gonna
to
be,
build.
yeah.
Plan, isn't there,
We
don't
will-
you have to approve the building plans, right? I mean,
Right,
include-
but see, what I'm saying is, like, right now, if anybody, once we have these standards in place, any subdivision that is built and approved after this date in 2020, any future planner is gonna know that that's already been approved, so that contractors could build on those lots. Everything's great because they've followed these stricter guidelines in that process. But in the infill, that's gonna be a little trickier.
So this, you're saying, maybe I misunderstood, that this ordinance would not apply to any infill housing. It's only toward housing when there's a lot split, or a new development, a planned unit development, or,
No, that's what we're hoping that it's gonna do both, but
Okay.
it's where does it come in and where doesn't it? Because someone in the future isn't gonna know, unless they know that anything after 2020, they know that they followed these new regulations. But if that subdivision was older and now somebody's coming with a plan to build on the lot, then they should be required to do that
Right, it
on
should
that.
trigger, because it's going
Yeah.
forward, no matter
Yeah.
what, it's going forward. I mean, they could have split the lot 10 years ago, that's fine, and nothing's happened, it's still permeable, it's all working, but the day that it sells off and you have somebody that wants to build on it, then it's gonna trigger this. It should trigger these new standards.
I think where it got really kind of difficult for me was that we still have a lot of lots around town that, people just decided to have a double lot, and they're all over town. But in the original subdivision, it was okay for that time frame. But I think honestly, we could probably say with climate change and with, changes that we have to our own setbacks, we should require it on a lot that's existing.
If that lot changes for any reason, then these regulations kick in.
Yes. Yes.
If it's different than the original use
Correct.
intended.
So that's what I'm asking. If it's a lot that if you went on a subdivision and that is the exact same lot that was there from 1945, never been built on, then it wouldn't apply?
No, it would.
It would apply.
Once
Would.
it's
As soon as you
started,
change the use of that lot,
it goes from empty
this
to building.
applies.
Then we're gonna, these will kick in. And the only way we're gonna know is beyond 2020 that the new regulations had applied and then that wouldn't be required. That's what I'm saying. Because, for example, Birch 3, let's say these regulations were in place for Birch 3. Well, Birch 3 has taken a number of years to finally build out, and different contractors come in. They shouldn't all have to come in with, and doing a stormwater plan, should they?
Yeah.
When it should
Yeah.
already be
Absolutely.
done?
Can we-
Absolutely.
So
Because you don't
For
know-
any new build, I
Yeah.
would think they would.
Doesn't matter that they've got the property is empty. Once you dig and you're gonna start building, these trigger in. This is a going forward. This is on a
And
going
so the
forward basis.
triggers will be the low impact guidelines for them.
If they apply.
For the subdivision regulations, the larger plat is gonna be the stricter retention detention, and the low impact guidelines will be for every build from here on out. That
Now-
would be,
To go back to Tom's point, are we gonna stay 800 square feet? Or are we gonna have a middle ground?
well, low impact guidelines now are gonna be required whether it's 800 square feet or not. We're not gonna have that threshold. Except for, it's the threshold for the subdivision that doesn't matter.
So, right, so I would say that instead of 800 square feet,
Yeah.
I'm trying to restate what I think we're coming to.
I know.
Instead of 800 square feet, it's any infill development is low-impact development guidelines are applicable. If you have a planned, what did you call it, a plat or
Planned unit development,
a planned unit development,
or
those
PND, that's the.
would
plan.
be following the other ordinance, the rest of the guidelines, which currently only include retention or detention. I think we could talk about whether there should be some additional practices added to that pool, but those are traditionally applied to larger planned developments, more than an
So
acre.
if you have someone coming with a pocket neighborhood development, and they followed the detention, retention, and they got the civil engineer that did those calculations, they also need to bring their low-impact guideline plan too, because they're also gonna turn right around and build all the units on that lot.
Well, if the pocket neighborhood or planned unit development, whatever it is, if they're totally taking care of their stormwater as a subdivision with the retention to detention through the stricter guidelines, why would you need
Yeah.
anything else?
You
right?
would,
You wouldn't.
right. So that's like, if we look at, I live in Thistle Creek. So when Thistle Creek was developed, when Jonathan platted it out, put a stormwater basin in the middle, and now none of the lots, as they're constructed, those lots, the stormwater is controlled through that main control. So none of us, as we've built our houses, had to put low-impact development or anything.
The bigger one
Okay,
trumps it. The
so
bigger,
that-
the
so
big
I
one
guess-
That
trumps
is
it.
the control for the
What I was
whole
saying
area.
earlier, you misunderstood what I was saying, was
Okay.
it as I use Birch 3 as an example, I'll use Thistle Creek. When these individual contractors come forward, my question was, do they still need to do the low impact guidelines? But you're saying they've already, well, I'm
So
misunderstanding.
in Thistle Creek,
Subdivision
Yeah.
I can
design.
talk to Thistle Creek
Okay.
because I know that there was a stormwater basin designed into the neighborhood. At
Right.
Birch 3, I don't know.
Yeah,
So,
and there is a
But to
retention.
There
go
is,
back to
okay.
your
Then-
point
then-
and your plat, they was all designed originally to be above ground, and now we have basements. So where do they pump that water out now? So we've had that issue come up here recently.
Yeah.
So they wanted to cut the curb, just throw it on the street, and we won't let them cut the curb. They gotta take it to the detention pond. So they have to bore underneath to get it into that area.
right, right.
So the plans changed from years ago when they started the development. Now they're allowed to dig basements and have sump pumps and all that. So it's a fine line. I mean, we've seen it all
Yeah,
in a short time.
Well, in Littlewood, where I live, they did not allow basements, and nobody asked for a variance on that. No one has basements in Littlewood. And we have 100-year, supposedly, detention pond that everything flows down there, and it was really bad last year. I mean, the levels reached up to the houses because of our rainwater increase. And what I would have wished they would have done was locate 3 open spaces without trees and put in some huge catchment cisterns that people could then, I mean, when you divide cisterns between 14 neighbors, you can afford it. And
Yeah.
so basically all that water, which is a resource, could have been held and used. So that's something that I would like to see added on as an option, is to have cisterns and find ways to make it affordable so many people can share in the cost of installing those underground. So that's just in terms of stormwater, well, rainwater management. So Tom, you were trying to make
Yeah.
things
so,
succinct.
right,
You were-
so you had for proposed developments, any infill development, or we kind of got sidetracked there.
Yeah. So let's step back and do it the other way around. For planned developments, more than an acre, you follow the main stricter guidelines, retention, detention, right? So that would be for any development, so a developer, you know, I can't think of an area except maybe Glass Farm or whatever. If there's an area where a big development's going in, or a pocket neighborhood or whatever, if it's, according to the Ohio's rule is more than an acre of development, then they would, larger than an acre, then you would have to follow these guidelines. So then, the things that are smaller than an acre, the infill housing, we would just let them use the low-impact development guidelines.
And what about the accessory structures? Because you mentioned those, Denise.
Well, it would follow the low impact.
Low
They
impact.
all follow the
Yeah,
low
they'll all
impact,
follow,
okay.
Yeah.
that was my biggest thing, is that we see more of that going on
Okay.
with the accessory structures, and we definitely want those controlled,
Yeah.
because that's the big push of stormwater.
Yeah.
Even though some of,
I mean, I think we did a
Okay.
conditional, yeah, we did the conditional use with that one on Winter Street, just so that we could check back, that the village could check back and make sure they were doing things appropriately.
And to accommodate Nadia's comment, could the stricter guidelines include some innovations like the cistern suggestion, and maybe Tom has some other, I mean, they're probably more innovative
Yeah.
stormwater managements
There
for
are,
big
including
big areas.
curbs and channeling water that's running off the street into inlets, that you actually have naturally occurring rainwater gardens where you use biofiltrate. I mean, there's a lot, and I can share resources for that with you after. I don't want to,
No, we'll keep,
Take
well,
time,
yeah,
yeah.
we'll just keep
Denise,
listening.
is that something you could add to the incentives section for the PUDs?
Incentive section. Well,
Like, we offer incentives for offsets, like green roofs, various things. I mean, if alternative stormwater
Yeah.
management techniques was added, then it could be reviewed at the time of the development.
and that's to do with deeper green, it's actually called green infrastructure. It's much deeper level than low impact.
I know we had it as as an incentive for like density and things like that, but now I think we're just saying, you need to do it. I think that's what I'm hearing we're saying, is that,
No, I mean, as opposed to, we're gonna build 2 detention basins.
yeah.
If the developer said,
Oh,
I can put in 3 cisterns and this, and in exchange
Oh.
of like this.
mhm.
Then it becomes a negotiable asset.
Okay. Is there anything else on this in the stormwater regulations that, you think we need to comment on?
There was, trying to make sure that, with the flow, okay, if you're going down through the regulation and the ordinance, post-construction runoff is E.
On page,
11.
page 11, okay.
I have something for page 9, but.
Oh, you had, okay.
Can I mention
Yeah.
something on page 9, which is to do with hydraulic design? It says the shall be designed to contain the 25-year rainfall frequency. So which statistics are we basing that on? Because last year, the Miami Conservancy said that the total rainfall for 2018 was 50.68 inches, which is 10 inches above the year before. And so this is going to increase with climate change, the heating, and more evaporation of water, moisture into the atmosphere. Is that number, where are the statistics coming from? Is it based on past numbers, or are we addressing climate change? And we've seen it, 4 inches of rain in
Right.
April, so how do we accommodate the change and shift in, rainfall that's seems like it's going to continue?
Yeah, so I have looked into this a bit because of my job, and, trying to adapt, trying to provide adaptations. But when you look at the body of evidence we have and the projections for rainfall, the amount of rainfall we're actually getting and the frequency duration curves don't really change the sizing of controls very much. Like, it's fairly negligible.
And why is
Currently.
that?
I mean, I have a whole presentation about all the data, like looking at the, forecast from the climate, the UN's climate report. So taking all their statistics, running them through those projections, what is that amount of additional rainfall that they're predicting based on the models, even the worst case scenarios, don't actually create any difference in design. Now, what we experienced last year don't fit with the predictions that the models are showing. But, I'm just saying, based on the UN,
Yeah.
the best science that we have,
Right.
that's the way
And
we
when,
calculate.
and when you say 25-year, is that a moving number? Like it's taking the 25 years period now that we're in, and 10 years from now, it would take in the 25-year period that falls there? I mean, is
So that was one of the things that we were looking at with this analysis, was should these design frequencies be changed? Should the volumes, the depths be changed? And the evidence was no. At this point, no. You can do that. That's one way of doing it, is if your period of record is 60 years of data, in 10 years, you could look back and say, well, yeah, your 25-year storm's going to be different based on the additional data you have. But these standard 5, 10, 25-year, 100-year storms are delineated for different regions, and they seem to be holding at this point.
One of the things when we talked with Choice One Engineering was, what they had said was, you previously had the rainfall, what you would get in a 24-hour period, you're getting in like a 12-hour period or less. And so they were adapting these to try to already change
Okay,
versus what,
to be more protective.
to be more protected
That's
than
good.
what Greene County standards are, which are from the 1980s.
Mhm.
And ours weren't like from the 90s, so.
And if you go in the Miami Conservancy District, they show the charts and the development and exponentially how things are. And I understand the statistics that you looked up, Tom, and that's talking about on the global,
Well,
just
these were-
overall.
Yeah,
But the
go
point is, there's still microclimates that are picking up and popping up, and that's all well and good. So if we have the whole long-term range of rain is coming down in a shorter period of time, but based on the total statistics, it still is the same number. But we're having much more intense downpours.
Yeah,
And
that's
those are what we need to accommodate for, and at least assume plan for the worst and hope for the best. And also to apply practices that will reduce fossil fuel use and compaction of soil and, all that stuff.
Is that what Choice One did do? They took that into account, the bigger
They
rain
did.
events, the short rain
That's the
events,
reason why they recommended us being proactive and upsizing.
and not following Greene County
Correct.
standards, okay.
Okay. Okay, that was all I wanted to say about that.
Just want to be on the record that I'm not a climate change denier.
I can attest to that. That you're not.
You wanted to make a comment on page 11.
Yes. So, this, under E, there's a very important phrase at the end of E1 that's missing, which is general permit. So what they're trying to refer to here is the Ohio EPA construction general permit, which is where, which controls, that is the permit that controls post-construction runoff. That's where everything, what we're trying to comply with this rule. Without this rule, we're not actually complying with EPA's post-construction.
So that's all we need to do is just add in there.
General
Yes.
permit.
Okay?
And adding that does allow for additional stormwater controls beyond retention and detention.
Which is good.
Yes. So what we write up, I think the way this happens is that now with we have different guidelines for detention, retention. That is what must be followed just for those practices. But the other practices in the construction general permit are applicable as well.
So that would just go after general construction permit, or it's in that sentence with the EPA? How does it work? How is the
Yeah,
wording, Tom?
Construction general permit. You just
Okay.
add general permit to the end of that sentence and you're good to go.
Okay.
By doing that, is there more that we need to put somewhere else or place more information on? Or would your average Ohio professional engineer be able to understand that?
They should be able to understand that.
Okay.
At least they can look it up.
Okay. Under page 12, I was just curious about this, a grading plan with minimum finished floor elevations submitted along with the construction plans to identify the lot grading and in-track drainage plan for the development. Just want to make sure.
Is that an addition? I mean,
That-
the whole thing's an addition. You
Yeah.
highlighted it.
Yeah, I
It
was
seems
just,
to make sense.
yeah,
So
everybody's,
it seems to me that you couldn't show that there is no flooding of the lot without saying what the finished floor elevation of your
There you go.
building is.
and so will that help, because we have had situations in infill where the house has been built up really elevated high, and then the water is just literally
Yeah.
going onto the neighbors.
Yeah, that's bad.
And we have the zoning, and that's the reason I kind of want to bring this up. All we have in the zoning code right now, which is fine, but with this, will help. is that stormwater cannot run onto your neighbor's property. But that's all it says. And you have like a year from the time, I don't know if it says a year from the time the permit is issued or a year from the time
I think it's final construction.
final construction, that if those problems arise, you've got to fix that.
Goes back to what Dina was talking about on Winter Street.
But they shouldn't arise now that we're going to require
Going forward,
this.
right.
Okay, great.
Yeah. You're comfortable with that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Anything else on page 13?
Though it does look like it's duplicated, that wording, a site grading plan with minimum finish grade shall be required by design engineer as part of the construction plans. Sorry, that's, do you see where that is?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do. Mhm.
Just noticed that. It's-
Okay.
Maybe this sentence is, this is where it should stay.
Where are you?
Above
page
stormwater
13.
runoff policy,
Mm-hmm.
the 2 paragraphs up, a site grading plan with minimum finish grade. See that? Yeah, that's similar language to what was highlighted.
Oh.
Grading plan with minimum finish floor elevations. But this, I like this sentence at the end that says the grading plan shall show all intended direction of surface water flow.
That's huge.
That, you know, kind of gets at what we were just talking about.
So it's, but the only thing that I see that is not in, that is not covered is, well, to identify the lot grading, which that's, I mean, that's part of the grading plan, but an in-track drainage plan for the development?
I mean, that's, could be interpreted as showing the intended direction of surface runoff.
Okay.
But
If
it's
it-
not as
yeah.
clear as, to me.
Shall show,
So this is
Oh,
for
okay, so-
development, this is for actual, a development, we're not talking about infill here, this is the infill, right? Or is this just development in general?
this is like if you're taking undeveloped land and you're gonna
Create
create,
a development?
Yes.
Not one house? A multiple house development? I'm confused.
We want it to apply to infill as well.
As well, yeah.
Yeah.
But this is also for, let's say, a developer wants to develop 6 acres, for example.
Yes.
right,
Right.
right.
Okay.
So you're thinking the part I had highlighted in yellow, just strike that, because it's already covered on page 13 anyway.
Yeah,
It's much clearer on page 13.
Okay. Okay. Page 14. Page 15.
Wait, just a minute, I'm just reading my notes.
And this is the section where somewhere you'd put in any other constructed solution, stormwater solutions besides just detention and
Where would that
retention.
be?
In this, it would generally be in this section.
Okay, because there are things
Somewhere.
to do with curbs, you know, where you can actually incorporate rain gardens as part of a curb. Because it seems like they really are heavy into retention and detention basins, which would be nice to move away from that model. But,
So you would have, instead of the current E, you would have F, G, you know, H, I, whatever
other
other
things
things would
to be
be.
added in.
Nadia, would you want to send those to me? What
Yeah,
else should be
and
added?
And actually, I'm going to recommend everyone gets this book, Artful Rainwater Design. I've been singing its praises. I learned so much, but this really is the future of engineering and harvesting rainwater. So, and they have great examples of what they've done, from communities to museums. And I can list those things and send them to you, but this book is strongly recommended.
So do you want to just add what you think should also go under?
I can send you a list?
Yes, for those,
Yeah,
your list,
Yeah,
okay.
I'll send you a list.
All right.
one other question under detention and retention basins, D,
Yeah.
is,
You said
Did y'all-
under B?
D.
Oh, D,
As in,
okay.
yeah, as in danger signs.
Mm-hmm.
How do y'all feel about requiring danger signs be mounted? I feel like that is a requirement. I'm not a fan of that requirement. If it is desired, then I feel like we have to determine or define what deep water is. If you get my meaning, it says, danger signs shall be mounted to warn of deep water. So is that, you can drown in, 6 inches of water?
A baby can, yeah.
So,
And you, yeah.
what do we really want to have signs, danger signs at all detention ponds? Like right now, if you went out to Antioch, McGregor, or Antioch University.
Midwest, yeah, that thing.
Midwest, there would have to be a sign there.
Mm-hmm. It looks
I don't know.
dangerous to begin with, because it's got all that algae in
I
it.
don't,
So we'll just, yeah.
it's not always required. Some people do require it, but it's not
So you're
it's not a
saying-
standard practice.
So you're saying aesthetically, that would sort of be an off-putter to have danger signs everywhere someone has a,
In my opinion.
well, if they don't have a detention basin, they don't have to put a danger sign up, right? Is that a required law by Greene County to have danger signs up?
I'm not aware of it.
Oh.
Why don't we strike it?
Yeah, I'll strike it. Laura, you were saying something about what also on there? You said something about at.
Just like this is the point on page 15, you would change the E to something else, but right there you would add other acceptable large-scale constructed stormwater solutions.
Mm-hmm.
That Nadia's going to give you a list of those.
Oh, I see.
Tom. I mean, for example, I know nothing about this area generally, but I've heard there's such a thing as constructed wetlands, and I don't know if that's a real thing or a
Yeah.
good idea, you know?
It's essentially a retention basin, but
Yeah,
it's got
it's
vegetation.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds very appealing to me, but if it's workable.
And it would be put in a place that naturally would be occurring that way? So there's ways that you're working with the land and increasing those places, or even channeling, even keeping water at a surface where you see it in a more prominent place. So there's many different ways where water is being seen as something beautiful.
And this is where, that's actually one of the practices in the construction general permit.
Oh, great.
That's just a standard practice that's approved. There's other more LID type things like infiltration basins, or which are sort of like large rain gardens, permeable pavement. There's all kinds of other practices here.
Also, it could be reduction of lawns that don't have any organic matter in, that basically ends up with runoff as, reducing the footprint of mowed lawns. I mean, because that does deal with permeability, that a lot of water runs off those kinds of surfaces. So maybe having a better balance, something to think about. But I can.
So Nadia and I will get together, let's talk about that one and
get
and some other ones, and
statistics,
see
yeah.
if we can provide some
together.
additional practices that aren't in the construction general permit.
Yeah, okay.
I had a comment on street trees on page 16. So it's often, if you don't have a big tree lawn, what's called between the curb and the sidewalk, it's better for the trees generally if they could be placed close to the sidewalk on the private property. Now, I know that's out. So if there's a way to allow that, if we're going to require street trees, if the landowner's allowed, and
Yeah,
I
I
know
know, and
legally
that's
there
kind
has
of
to
a
be some
question, that's why I wanted-
machinations.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Johnny.
but, yeah.
Yeah, because honestly, Laura, we've, like, for example, over on West South College, those trees in the tree lawn are really, have caused problems.
They have,
And
right.
you have an opinion, I'm sure, about
Yeah,
that.
I've talked to the tree committee pretty extensively about this, and we are not allowing any tree planting in that right of way unless it's 4 foot. between the curb and the sidewalk. And the problem with allowing them to plant closer on the sidewalk, then when we come through and we trim up their trees, then they're over the sidewalk, but it's on their property. So I would rather be a little bit further onto their property versus right next to the sidewalk.
Why don't we have water absorbing plants in the tree lawn instead of trees, like sedge grasses and, eupatorium, plants that will actually absorb and uptake rainwater instead of having, because trees won't survive for too long if you put them in a 6-foot, and I second what Laura was saying, that they're usually known as tree vaults because they basically end up being very expensive perennials because they'll last for, 15 years, and they start dying. So it's just a recommendation that some vegetation that will help with uptake of rainwater would be something to consider. But those could be things that Tom and I could write down and suggestions.
So these aren't tree boxes in sidewalks. This would be in soil, in the tree lawn.
The one you're recommending, the one, you mean on someone's property?
Well, no, see, yeah.
Or it's
so
the
kinda-
strip.
It's the strip that's in the right of way.
The
but
hell
it's-
strip,
Right,
is that what they call them?
between the sidewalk and the curb.
And the
Yes, the hell
curb, yeah.
Tree line.
So, I mean,
G does say minimum of 6 feet for
oh,
tree lawns.
then, for the tree lawn?
Yeah, tree lawns shall be
Okay,
a minimum
never
of 6
mind.
feet.
That'll solve it. We have places where it's not wide enough. to
Yeah.
do.
Right.
Okay.
And so we only really have any jurisdiction if it's in that public.
No, I know, I've talked to the tree committee too about it, and anyway, but you might require some sort of a legal agreement as part of this be for new subdivisions, that landowners allow trees on their side of the sidewalk, rather than, it just depends. I mean, and that may be, when the design comes for approval, that might be a solution, if they have to have smaller tree lawns for any reason.
Maybe we need to add another dimension there, because that's very general. If you say tree lawn shall be a minimum of 6 feet, 6 feet deep, 6 feet wide, there's no specification. So there needs to be another size, so people realize between the street and the sidewalk, it's 6 foot, not 6 foot by 3 feet. Well, it's 6 feet. So maybe,
Yeah, 6 feet wide.
yeah, to put like what dimension it's
Between the street and
defining.
the sidewalk.
Yeah, 6 feet between the street and the sidewalk.
Okay.
And is this all this that we're talking about is existing language, though?
Yes.
Okay.
So, now's the chance, if there's some, since we're doing this, if you have any concerns or, right now, we have that tree list,
That's the new one, right? The updated one that
it was it was updated with a urban,
Forester,
forester out of, she was based in,
she's got a Van
She's-
Buren?
yes, yes.
Denise, why does it need to be an appendix to these subdivision regulations? Why can't it be the list kept by the village planning department? Just because Wendy will be updating that list as time goes on with climate change and diseases and, so we don't have to change the appendix all the time. Just like, she has, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, urban forester, whoever it is, does have a street tree list, recommended streets. Just say we use the ODNR urban forestry recommended street tree list.
Okay.
Because I think it does change.
Would it make sense for Nadia, for you to look at G8?
Where-
Interior landscaping, so that it's more inclusive of
G,
water mitigating in some cases.
oh, that, yeah.
That's actually just 8.
So,
Okay, it's 8. You see where I'm?
Yeah, G, a tree, after tree
After
lawns.
G.
I just want to make sure, Laura, that we always have it, though, that it doesn't get lost somewhere.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I want to
Or
keep it
then
in
how
as
about-
an appendix.
And I
As,
think,
uh,
I think the
something-
Environmental Commission provided some recommendations for updates to the DNR list. I think there was some,
Yeah.
And the thing is here, if it's the preservation of existing trees and or hedges, it might be a hedge
there
you
were some
really want to
invasive
get rid of.
or
I mean,
some things
suppose
that we
it's something
didn't
you
want
don't
on
like,
there.
like it's an
that's why we
invasive
amended
species.
it, but, you know, we discussed.
So, that's,
It
you
is a hassle having
know,
an
somebody
extra
might have a
list.
hedge of honeysuckle or burning bush, and we're actually telling them that they should try to get rid of those. So it's saying that, yeah, primarily of new tree planting or the preservation of existing trees. I think trees that are, you know, old and should be preserved need to be cared for, but, and/or hedges? That's the question, because lots of people have barberry bushes and things that are now considered.
Well, would we want to just then add a line that is approved by the,
We have it in our document, but didn't we put together with the landscape management plan about all the, we did
we have,
that.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, so
we
say,
we can
please
refer
refer
it
to that.
Yeah.
And that would include some of those, and it would include also the natural
Referring to-
landscaping,
It's the weeds ordinance.
Mhm.
It's under the weeds ordinance.
which gives provisions for these more eco-friendly.
Weeds ordinance. Which has, the managed landscape.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's
yep.
it.
Okay, that's good. I'll add that in there.
Thank you, Judy, for mentioning that.
And then on page 17, I'm scratching out pocket neighborhood development on this because we realized there's such a small lot anyway. It was gonna be in the latest one we had, it was gonna like add an additional like 40 trees or something crazy, that, in addition to what they already had to have, so we're just taking it out of that. For 122608, again, this is that, I just highlighted that. Just talking about public improvements relating to streets, sanitary sewage, storm sewage, water distribution, fire protection shall be in accordance with this chapter and any applicable Greene County regulations.
I have something about
So-
122607 before, about parkland
Oh,
dedication.
Okay,
Is that okay?
yeah,
It's to do with hardscaping and playgrounds and concrete. I mean, is there a percentage increase that you would allow of green space, porous pavement to putting, let's say somebody wants to put 5 basketball courts out?
we, oh boy, let's see. When it comes to lot coverage, it doesn't include your, like your driveway, apron, you don't add that. Now, when it comes to
This is public use. for
open
park.
space, I think the parking lot does factor in, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I know it does for the PUD,
Okay.
but I don't know. So what would you want to
No, I was just
suggest?
questioning, because when it says playgrounds, recreational uses, does that mean, is there any restriction on how much more hard, non-porous, or non-porous surfaces can be added? You know, what is that percentage of dedicated place? Does parks get a bigger percentage than a basketball court, because it's adding to the surface runoff? I'm just putting a hypothetical question out, and it's maybe nothing you need to deal with right now, but it's something to think about.
Yeah, I'll look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think in this section, we should add like or open space to use for parks, playgrounds, recreation, or open space / natural areas, including uses in Part C. And then you need to add a sentence, land dedicated for stormwater management does not count toward that 5%, because a lot of developers will try to count their stormwater
right.
basins and retention as open space. Right, Tom? You've probably seen that.
Count in this one. Okay. All right, and so any questions on I had that, especially those found in Articles 5 and 8 of the subdivision regulations. But again, streets and sanitary sewer is, we were continuing having it be a part of Greene County. But should we strike out storm, or should I blow that sentence out where storm should be under Green Village and then the other?
This is storm sewerage, so that's related to the piping, not the detention and retention that we were just talking about.
Right, so,
So I'm not familiar, Johnny, have we changed, do we have stricter different requirements for stormwater piping
That's what Matt was
than
working
Greene
on.
County?
Green County does not allow you to do a lot of things. As far as, if you're talking about piping, there's minimum sizes for Green County where we're asking to go larger. So they could come in with Green County's minimum when we're trying to go larger for the future.
let me go back and look at,
I guess, so I'm saying if we were to strike storm sewerage there, we should make sure we have requirements in place that would replace that. That they could, developer could.
We could
refer.
ask Matt that.
okay, okay.
Because the piping's gotta be the same as if we're gonna allow the larger swells, and for the future, the piping's gotta match it. If they go to Greene County standard and we're, our standard over here, then you could have a massive overflow.
See, now I kind of did blow it out in here saying for storm sewer shall be in compliance with the current construction and material specifications in 122606A6. And I did go back and I swear I saw something about that. Where did he have? And maybe it wasn't enough. But he was talking about closed conduits,
Under the hydraulic.
under
Calculation.
structural
Way back then.
design. So,
Structural design. So page 9.
so page 9, would that cover it, or am I misinterpreting that?
I think we need something from Matt to,
If you go on
If we're-
page
if we're-
10, okay, it says storm drainage within the development which is capable of being transmitted a pipe 48 inches or less in diameter shall be carried in a closed conduit, blah, blah, blah. Oh, it also means that requirements of the Environmental Protection Agency, construction permit, okay. But ask Matt, okay.
we should have our own standards for closed pipe. If we're not allowing Green Counties.
Okay.
I don't see pipe material, Johnny, just might want to check that.
Right.
A lot of the other stuff's covered here, bedding, minimum clearances.
Okay. Okay, moving on. I had on, page 22, we've been talking about, we require notation about adequate water and sewerage connection laterals, and we've added electric connections now, so wanted to say an underground electric connections, because any new developments have to have underground electric. And then, do we want to say anything, Johnny, about the property owner responsible for getting the lines to the mains, or is that just a given?
That's a given.
Okay. And then, under 122612, any buildable lots created through this replat will be provided with same comment about the water, sewer, and underground electric connections. Page 24, the applicant will be held responsible for any negative impact on surrounding lots which becomes apparent within 1 year from the date of the recording of this plat. See, that's where I'm worried. So you're saying changing it from, well, see, here's the thing. That developer could move on, be done, and then it's a separate contractor that's building, and then something happens, so.
And that's what happened with Birch 3, the developers kept, unless it's the same person there. Is he still there, Chuck? I don't
Yeah,
know.
he's
Oh,
still there.
Okay.
But there have been some other people that have built, so I don't know, that's a tough one. I don't know that we legally can make them responsible for that far ahead. I mean, once it's been
Yeah.
recorded.
Maybe it doesn't, I like that requirement, but maybe it doesn't belong under the replat section. Maybe it, I don't know, because it should be triggered by the construction, the developer, not the replat.
Yes, because your comments earlier about any time the use of a lot changes, it kicks in the new regulations, that should.
So we should just strike it? I mean, that was something that had
Yeah.
already existed, from, okay.
So you're striking all of D.
I'm just wondering, as a matter of law, if you can limit a developer's liability this way. You know, I'm just trying to struggle to understand the purpose of it.
Could we just say,
But that's a limited time unless I'm reading it wrong. It says it becomes apparent within 1 year. After 1 year, they're no longer liable, correct?
Well, I know, but I don't think we can change theories of liability with
Right.
this.
No, I'm just I'm trying to understand it,
Yeah.
what it said here. So,
Yeah,
so
I don't know why it's there.
Yeah.
well, couldn't you just say, will be held responsible for any negative impact on surrounding lots, period?
Yeah, I would just say period, and then let the law sort out whether
Yeah.
the original developers, the cause, the
Yeah.
50% cause, whether they have any liability, you know, that has to do with statutes of limitation and causation.
Well, they might work harder on their planning if they know that there's
Yeah.
no end. to-
Time limit, yeah,
Yeah.
no end game.
Would we,
It's
instead of
gonna be whatever.
applicant, would we want to say developer/contractor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That way we can
Yeah.
cover whatever happens for future.
Yeah, are we done with that one?
Or I might make it and/or contractor.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Yes, we're done with that one. Sorry? Well, it could be the lot owner. I mean, it could be could be the property owner for a replat. So I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, let's just stick with the applicant. Yeah, good point, Judy. I forgot where I was at.
I have a comment back on 21 about minor subdivisions. Would the stormwater rules apply to the, what applies to the minor subdivision, I guess? The low impact stormwater design standard, or? Because a minor subdivision wouldn't have to build a retention or detention facility of some kind.
What page are you on?
I'm on 21, the minor subdivisions.
So it's like a
12,
lot split? If somebody
know,
does a
but-
lot split?
It could be up to 5
Yeah.
lots, right? I mean,
Right.
so, I mean, we want, what, the low-impact rules to apply to minor subdivisions? I mean, I would
It feels-
want at least that.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
And we,
Yeah.
I don't know if something,
It feels like, so generally, like I said, the construction general permit says 1 acre of development or more. And 5 lots would be more than 1 acre, wouldn't it? If it's
Possibly.
11,000, isn't, what's our minimum lot
not
size,
necess-
11,000?
not the way it
minimum
is right
4,800
now.
square feet
4,800.
would be the minimum.
Okay, so then, yeah, that wouldn't necessarily.
That's the
But-
thing, you're,
But if it were, so if it were less than an acre, I mean, I would propose, if it were less than an acre, low-impact development, if it's more than an acre, the standard.
Okay. Okay.
Does that seem?
Yep, that makes sense. Um, we have this part in here that says upon acceptance of public improvements by the village, this 4% fund shall be adjusted in accordance with actual expenditures for review and inspection services. This is on final plats. Sometimes we have, if we are gonna require this plan by a professional engineer, do you feel it's important that we still have our own contracted engineer look at that plan?
oh, yeah,
Okay, so that's gonna cost the village.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, we have to have it reviewed.
yeah, so
This
I
is
guess,
what's there
do
now,
you feel that-
4%.
do you feel that that will cover that? I mean,
I-
it can be adjusted accordance with actual expenditures for review and inspection services, so that could cover it. Okay. All right. And I did mention that about the zoning code's fee schedule has that. Okay. I think this is just my comment. This is not, yeah. If additional fees may be collected in cases where recovery of incurred costs is necessary. Amendments to submitted plans requiring further review will be assessed such fees. The exact fee will be determined by the incurred cost. But the planning code is different. The replats and the minor subdivisions are, those fees are built into the actual planning code. They're not on the zoning code's fee schedule. So should I put that same kind of statement in there for minor subdivision and replats where new lots are created?
I would.
Okay, yes, is the answer, okay. I'll come back with that. All right, so then, we're kind of getting, I'm not even getting through these. Stormwater guidelines for low-impact developments, were there any?
Yeah, I agreed with Tom's comments about, the handyman thing, dry well, those I wouldn't, that's like, it's not gonna do much. And then rain barrels, I don't know, makes people feel good, but when you multiply, 0.625 gallons coming off your roof for every square foot of roof per inch of rain. So in an average house, let's say the footprint's 32 by 24, which is 768 square feet, would produce 476 gallons of water with 1 inch of rain, which would equal 10 rain barrels with the 50. So I think if you're recommending rain barrels, it would have to be done realistically. Who's going to put 10 of those things on their house? So
Nobody.
there are other options for that, but
So,
just.
I don't want to put a lot on
I
you,
know.
but at the same time, I don't really understand this stuff, so would there be a possibility between now and the April meeting, you could
Well, Tom
make
and
the
I could-
revisions
could-
to this?
Or we could make some suggestions,
because
right,
we're-
Tom? We can just
Because
do
we're
that.
basically gonna make this a handout that then they're gonna have to, provide us with that plan.
Right.
Because what he said also, Tom, about green roofs, I mean, you've got to know how to manage those. It's
Yeah.
not like you just stick them up and they're left. I mean, it involves maintenance, so, I mean, these are great, but we have to be realistic. So that could be included, other recommendations maybe that we could put in when we're giving this list that Tom and I are going to put forward, is include some other additional things?
So, yeah, so any, I'm just gonna put on here Nadia and Tom to.
Make
add-
suggestions.
Yeah, add, I will send you
Okay.
their suggestions, and I'll send you the electronic of this, and you can,
Okay.
okay. And then just moving on, Exhibit C, that was just a typo that you can't even see on there. It's under E on that page. Just they needed to add T.
But I do think a permit should be allowed if people are going to resurface existing parking lots. What if they were gravel and they're going to put blacktop? And you've just all of a sudden increased your square footage of runoff. But that's, you can think about that. I don't need to go into detail. But on the next page, it says
Where-
you
where
don't
is
need
this
to resurface on number 4. F, it says a zoning permit shall not be required for the following. And so basically, it's free reign for whoever wants to resurface existing parking lots, and they might change the surface
No,
from,
go from something permeable
Yeah.
to impermeable.
yeah. So that's just something to be aware of. You might want to have some control over that, or at least advice or recommendations.
If, not changing,
I mean, would you want to just
pervious.
say existing impervious parking lots?
Yeah,
Yeah,
impervious.
Okay.
Okay, that takes care of that.
thank you,
Great.
Tom.
Yeah. And then the 200 square feet for the accessory structure, the only reason I was saying to make that 200 square feet, we don't have to, but Greene County doesn't have any requirement. And it was suggested that we maybe keep in line with their requirement as far as what we can do. Okay. Exemption, under D, Exhibit D, exemptions. Okay, so this is where I'm gonna have to come back to this. So, a site plan review has never been required for, a single or two-family dwelling. It doesn't require planning commission review. Zoning just basically looks at, you could look, just have this little drawing and say, okay, you met all the setbacks and the height, and you can, that's it.
But-
So,
Yeah, you're going to have to put this language in so that they tell us how stormwater is going to be managed. And that's really important because right now our code has skewed over the past 10 years towards more density. And that's the problem with density, is where's the water go?
but does that sound okay, or is there, based on what we've been saying?
I mean, what's been your experience with not requiring site plan review for 1 and 2 family dwellings, other than stormwater? I mean, is everything else working out okay?
Yeah.
I mean, because there's rules about where your water line goes,
Setbacks and,
setback and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, so this matches with what we've been talking
Same.
about.
Yeah.
Subdivisions that weren't approved under this existing, or this new rule, so that's basically infill,
Yeah.
then now require stormwater management. Yeah, I think that's good.
okay. And then under Exhibit E, and we have, right now, we don't really say much, so I just added under E, stormwater, it must comply with the planning code's stormwater management systems requirement. Exhibit F, there, let's see, where was that at?
I had something for chemical manufacturing and storage,
Oh, what page?
2, which is under Exhibit F, page 2.
Okay,
It says here, adequate safety measures shall be implemented and in use at all times. What is adequate?
we've never even had anybody come under industrial to us for chemical manufacturing and
Yeah,
storage, so.
But
So
the
I
point
don't
is
know.
that we need to put protections based on what we're dealing with now with the cleanup that we're facing
Yeah.
for the past 25 years. So
So what would you suggest?
we need to figure out well, we need to look at what those are and see, and if those are adequate for our village.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, it's,
Do you know what those are, Tom, based on what we've been working on, or?
well, it says, like Judy was saying, under B, it says state and federal, local,
Yeah.
state, local, county, state, and federal. I feel like that's good enough. Personally, I mean, without us to try to come up with additional definition of safety
Okay.
measures that,
Well, maybe we shouldn't say adequate, we should say in compliance with B, safety measures shall be implemented and in use at all times, because people could pick and choose. I just think the language is too loose.
You could actually just strike C, because if you're.
Because B's pretty, yeah,
There's no need for C.
Right.
right.
Or it could say the facility shall at all times operate according to blah, 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 and safety measures shall be implemented, and make that part of B.
Or have regulations and safety measures under B?
Yeah, that it goes, shall be implemented and in use at all times. Does that sound redundant?
Just add the last.
Just,
Yeah, so make that as part of B, without saying
Merge B and
adequate.
C together.
Yeah. So basically, the standards are those, not adequate
Shall
ones.
be implemented
okay.
at all
And
times.
then where did I have anything else on?
Yeah, there was something.
I know, where is?
You had one about
Okay, it's on
Oh,
page 12.
Page 12.
Under other P and D standards, this was just something because it came up prior to the work session. One of the things I'm suggesting in the pocket neighborhood development, this is kind of getting a little out of the environmental realm, but one of the things I'm suggesting as a result of what happened at our last meeting is we have like a staff requirement early on in the process when a pocket neighborhood development is coming forward. And then we have, we could also have a work session. Last time when we did this, it happened very early on. And then the pocket neighborhood development didn't come to the planning commission until months later. What I'm suggesting is that we may have a little work session in the beginning with staff and/or planning commission, but that when they come for pocket neighborhood development in the future, it's a two-part process. You come, the first part you're coming, it's basically that work session. Everything has to be provided at that meeting as though it was gonna be approved at that meeting. But it's a work session, and then the second follow-up meeting, that gives everybody a chance to really understand it, have questions. The next month, they come for the public hearing and approval process. So I'm just suggesting that that'll help tighten that pocket neighborhood development up a little bit more.
So you're shortening the period of time so that you're having the work session
No.
and then.
No,
the
I'm
next-
actually
Or maybe
increasing the period of
increasing
time.
it.
Okay.
I'm increasing it. You can still have your a work session early on if you want with planning commission, or just staff, whatever you want to do. But when it comes down to the actual time when you have everything together and you're ready to come through for the approval process, it's a two-part process with the
Okay.
planning commission.
Gotcha.
The first meeting is a work session, second, because had that happened, we
We
would have
would've
been able
avoided
to
a lot
have,
of-
The
yeah,
fire lane would have
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
when we came up for discussion, right.
Instead of getting into the bind
Right.
of having to
Right.
approve or not approve it.
yes.
Yeah.
Then it's feels more collaborative on
Yeah.
everyone's part.
It is, yeah, I think so. I'm hoping that that will work, yeah,
Because I read about it in the paper.
yeah. We, we managed to figure it out, so in the end, so we did figure it out. Okay, and then, was there anything else in that one? That was kind of, I think that was it. Exhibit G, site plan review, again, just bringing up the stormwater management plan in addition to the stormwater guidelines for low-impact development available from the zoning department. And then Appendix A, fee schedule. This is just a cleanup thing. I'm adding a demolition permit because we do offer that. It's a very simple thing because Greene County already offers it, but we require it too because we need to know, because we have meters Johnny wants to be able to pull off of there prior to the demo. And then zoning compliance certificate, we just changing the wording to permit. We have a lot of people that ask for zoning compliance and we put staff time into it. And it's a letter usually, or maybe it's a form that we have to fill out on their behalf. It might be a title company, and we don't have really any permit process. So we're adding permit, and then we're actually gonna charge a permit for that. And that is it. Okay. All right, so hopefully I'll be able to come back to you next month if, it depends on if I get everything together with Matt and Nadia and Tom. If not April, it'll be May, but we'll come back then and we'll have our public hearing.
What are the timelines then for a response? You need information by what to make the April deadline?
The meeting is April 14th. Let me see. The packet would go out the 10th. So I'd like to have, if it's possible, before the end of this month. End
Okay.
of March, before the end of the month, so I can incorporate those changes into this.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. All right. I don't see anything under new business. We have agenda planning parking minimums?
No.
No? Okay.
All right now.
I have one thing,
Oh.
one question, for new business, not new business, but what are the possibilities of moving back to Monday meetings? Only for AJ. AJ is gonna continue to miss meetings. I sent him a text earlier today and said, can you make Tuesdays or are Mondays gonna be better for you? And he said Mondays will always be better for him. He's just jammed up on Tuesdays.
We'll always lose bigger on Mondays.
Yeah,
That's why we didn't
right.
get it.
Yeah, I thought AJ said it would be okay after the election, but he's saying no.
He's still gonna be involved with stuff. He sent me a text today with that.
I thought that Lisa needed it on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Right.
It was, I think that's because Mary Ann we were always having a lot of recusals at that point in time when we were going through, that Mary Ann always had recused, so we needed someone to back up. So it's a matter of, I guess it's a matter of Laura.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if it wasn't happening very often,
Her preference is to be present for it. She believes the planning commission, the second on the planning commission should be present at planning commission meetings. But,
I mean, I can send out another who can do what nights thing, and we can put it all back.
Would you
in the-
mind doing
I
that?
mean,
Just to see.
yeah, sure.
well, I just want to thank Tom
Oh,
and Nadia
yeah.
for
Thank
being
you.
here and helping us out.
Very
I know it
knowledgeable.
might
Very welcome.
be, we'll have you come, we'll need you to come back one more time.
And thank you, Nadia, too.
Good.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate the collaboration. It's good for the commissions to work together.
For
so
sure,
It's good.
yes. And thank you, Johnny, for your input. We
Yeah,
appreciate that, too.
And all your hard work with a very small staff.
Very small.
All right, with nothing else, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. We're adjourned for the night then.
Thank you.
All right.
You must be really bored for